gets the same energy we do, okay? It doesn't make anything up there. The sun's energy is added to the earth, and chlorophyll is able to capture it and use it. So it's a silly argument to say, all you got to do is add energy and that'll fix it. That is simply silly, not true.
Okay. Okay, question for Dr. Hovind. Dr. Schirmer held up the example of Lucy's pelvic bone. What is your response to Lucy being a common ancestor between man and ape?
I give a 30-minute answer to that on video number 2 on the table back there. And by the way, he mentioned something earlier about, all I had was a religion, and he said, well, it's not, we need a better answer for step 2. Okay, well, all you have is a religion also. But see, I'm not asking for my religion to be paid for by taxpayers. You are. So the burden of proof's on you, not me, okay? Lucy was nothing but a 3-foot-tall creature, probably some type of chimpanzee kind of animal. Charles Oxnard studied every single bone of Lucy and said it's not a missing link. He did what's called a computer multivariate analysis. I would point out, though, from a much bigger picture, no fossils count as evidence for evolution. None. You can't prove this critter. Go ahead and turn it on. You can't prove Lucy had any kids. And why would you think a bone you found in the dirt can do something animals today cannot do, which is produce something other than their kind? No fossils count as a bigger picture, and even if Lucy is something unusual in the form of a chimpanzee 3 feet tall with a little unusual feature, that still doesn't prove it's evolving to something else. It could have been a creature that went extinct. So this kind of evidence would not hold up for 3 seconds in a court of law. But see, the problem is, evolution doesn't have to be proven in a court of law. It only has to be made believable to a bunch of students who have an academic, or the teacher has an academic and psychological advantage over the students. That's why evolution, the people believe that. The guys who studied Lucy say, look, this is not a missing link. Charles Oxnard, I'll show you the reference here. You can check it out for yourself. Studied every single bone and said, Lucy, here we go. The various Australopithecines are indeed more different from both African apes and humans in most features than the latter are from each other. It's not a missing link. No fossils count to begin with, and even then, Lucy's not a good fossil to demonstrate evolution. Okay?
Taxpayers, here we go. Okay, back to the taxpayers business. Look, what makes it into public science course textbooks is the best science of the day, whatever that happens to be. There's nobody conspiratorially trying to plant it in there because they're anti-religious or anything like that. If the science isn't good, it is taken out of the textbooks, and this happens all the time, including within the biological sciences and evolutionary theory. Things change all the time as new evidence comes in. The reason you don't see creationist stuff in science textbooks is because they're not producing any science. If you want to be taught as a science, you actually have to do the science. And there's no science done. They don't write any science textbooks. They don't publish any scientific papers. All they do is go through science textbooks and science papers and pick out what they think are errors and say, that's our science. That's not science. You actually have to produce something. Produce evidence of a creator, for example, and they don't have that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Schirmer, you say there is evidence for the Big Bang. Can you give us your strongest evidence that it occurred?
Oh, I was told there'd be no math in this debate. Well, okay, so this really has nothing to do with evolution. This is a whole different theory. And the larger problem here is that Kent Hovind and so many people have a misinterpretation of what science is. They think of it as the physics lab experiment as the model of what science is. So much of science is inference. So much of it is inferring from different pieces of data, sequences. So much of the historical sciences are not anything at all like a physics experiment. So when you say, well, the Earth is only 6,000 years old or whatever, well, look, this is going to throw out all of cosmology, astronomy, chemistry, biochemistry, geology, historical geology, paleontology, archaeology. Don't think this has to do with evolutionary theory. All of science is completely wrong if he's right. There's no point of having any science. He says he's pro-science. He's completely anti-science because if he's right, it all goes out the window. So in terms of the Big Bang, well, there's a whole series of pieces of evidence that have to do with how explosions occur, what kinds of elements you would expect to find the most of if this explosion occurred, and we do find them. Again, I said the Big Bang was debated for many decades, And lots of people didn't accept it. A lot of hardcore scientific skeptics didn't believe it until the evidence amounted so much that it just became inevitable to accept it.
Well, the sky is falling is what he's trying to say, folks. If we believe in creation, everything's going to fall apart. I mean, all the sciences have to be thrown out. That's ludicrous. All the branches of science were started by creationists. The evolution theory has done nothing for the advancement of science. That's not why we put a man on the moon. That's not why you can do open heart surgery. Evolution is a useless theory, even if it's true. It is absolutely useless as far as science goes. You don't have to believe in creation or evolution to study science. You can learn about the biceps, the triceps, the deltoid, and all the different muscles of the body, and never get into origins. It doesn't matter. No doctor doing surgery cares at all about evolution while he's cutting somebody's heart out to replace it. It's a useless theory. And then there is no advancement in modern science from this evolution theory. The Big Bang theory, I think, is a great hindrance to, and many other theories about evolution are a great hindrance to science. There's all kinds of evidence against the Big Bang. The counter-rotation of at least 2 planets, Venus and Uranus. At least 8 of the 91 known moons are spinning backwards. Some whole galaxies are spinning backwards. 3 planets have moons going both directions at the same time. This can't happen with the Big Bang. You need to study some physics on that one. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Hoven, you admitted that roaches become resistant to pesticides. Please defend your stance that this is not a beneficial mutation for their kind.
Roaches become resistant to pesticides because some of the roaches in that population already had a resistance. When they dug up some of the guys that tried to find the Northwest Passage, we can shut it down, I don't have a slide ready for this. There were guys that froze to death trying to find the Northwest Passage up in Canada years ago. When they dug up and did an autopsy on them, they find some of them were resistant to penicillin. Well, that's interesting. Penicillin hadn't been invented yet. See, there are some people that already have a resistance to certain things in their system. So let's say you got 1,000 roaches and 5 of them have a resistance to a certain pesticide because of whatever reason. Okay, you put that pesticide down, it kills all but those 5. Those 5 then become the grandparents of everybody else, so the new roach population, and now you get a whole population of resistant roaches. That happens. It is still a roach. It is only something already in the gene code that was selected. You selected for that particular thing to survive. In this case, artificial selection instead of natural selection. That is not a process that's adding information, and it's not a process that's going to turn a rock to a human. In 20 bazillion years, it's not going to happen.
Okay, well, I'm not a big expert on cockroaches, although I like the hammer part. But these are fine examples of what we would call microevolution. The question is, how do we go from microevolution to macroevolution? One of the difficulties almost everybody has with this concept is that we evolved to consider ourselves in terms of time frames of years or decades, and it's hard to conceive of thousands of years or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of years. It just seems, impossible. It's counterintuitive. Yet there it is in the evidence, and so it makes it hard to grasp. We see the changes. We see the dogs changing in the course of 15,000 years, humans in the course of 150,000 years, with all the variety we have today. There it is. It's in the genes. It's in the fossils. It's corroborated across all these different independent lines of inquiry. It's the power of genetic variation and selection, which is a bottom-up designer.
Okay. Okay. Now, this was a question directed to you. What would you say is the creationist's strongest argument for the existence of God?
Oh, okay. This is like on your application to